Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, the UK general election is less than 2 weeks away. And according to the latest polling, Rishi Sunak is predicted to become the first sitting Prime Minister ever to lose their seat at a general election. Our Downing Street correspondent Simon Pusey will soon be joining me here in the studio for an update on the bruising campaign. And South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was sworn in for a second full term in office on Wednesday, despite his party, the ANC, failing to secure a majority in Parliament during last month's election. Africa analyst Tamzane Kajo will shortly be joining me here in the studio to discuss the president's options as he seeks to form a coalition government of national unity. Then later, Abdoulaye Sila, portfolio manager and head of corporate development at EnergyNet, will be joining me from here in the British capital to discuss next week's Africa Energy Forum, which is taking place in the Spanish city of Barcelona. But first, Rishi Sunak is predicted to become the first sitting Prime Minister ever to lose their seat at a general election. And the Conservatives are also on track to slump to just 53 seats, with around 3/4 of the cabinet being voted out. This is according to a major opinion poll conducted by the Telegraph newspaper. The Liberal Democrats are on course to be just behind the Tories on 50 MPs, leaving them in touching distance of becoming the official opposition party. Labour is forecast to have 516 seats and an estimated House of Commons majority of 382. This is double that won by Sir Tony Blair in 1997, as Sir Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister. These are, of course, just projections, but would have no doubt rattled every single member of the Conservative Party. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our Downing Street correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, great to be back in the studio. Thanks for keeping my seat warm. Hopefully you didn't get too comfy there. Let's talk about the UK general election campaign. 4 weeks of going up and down the country. It's been really difficult for Rishi Sunak, of course. Although he is a trooper, there are times when it does appear as if he's given up, but he hasn't. Talk to me about what's been going on, because so much has been taking place. Of course, there was that embarrassing display from the Telegraph as well, basically portraying a Tory wipeout. Is it going to be as bad as everybody's projecting?
Yeah, well, we're past the halfway mark, aren't we?
We are.
What is quite a long campaign.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's got worse in the polls for the Conservatives. This Telegraph poll that you mentioned gives the Tories just 53 MPs. That would be an absolute decimation. The lowest number of seats they've ever had is 156.
Including the PM losing.
Yeah, and the Chancellor, and many other sort of big Tory names. I think, the main gaffe is still Rishi leaving D-Day early. That really did get cut through for their real core voters and also the people they wanted to keep from Reform UK. That really did get cut through, and lots of people are still sort of angry about that. And then there's things like, he left that for an interview where he said, yes, I made sacrifices, I didn't get Sky TV. That just doesn't play too well because that's not really a sacrifice in many people's eyes. So it's just quite hard for Rishi Sunak. I think everything he does seems to just go down really badly at the moment. I think we are looking at pretty much certainly the Conservatives getting, in terms of their vote share, their worst performance since the First World War. And it just seems to be, sometimes in life when you get momentum's on your side, things seem to be going well. That seems to pick up and gather pace. It seems to be the absolute opposite for the Conservatives. It's really hard to turn this around. They seem to be in a damage limitation mode now where they're talking about don't give Labour a huge majority. So it's almost like they have really given up in terms of whether they can win. They just don't want it to be a complete decimation, because if Labour get a lot of seats, then they can, a big majority, then they can do lots of things in power that will limit the Conservatives in the future in terms of various things. Rishi Sunak has always had this big problem within the party since he took over from Liz Truss to try and keep this huge party very wide berth together. And the right of the party have been continually moving further right, and he's been trying to sort of keep them. But Reform have come in to take that spot, as everything in Europe, to be honest, has been going a little bit more right-wing generally.
Clearly.
We've seen in the European elections and in France. So Reform UK have come in at this point, and exactly. They claim to be talking for the working person, anti-woke, saying what most people think but can't be said in the PC world, and that does appeal to people on the right of the party. So it's strategically a good move by Nigel Farage to come in at this point, and he's a very charismatic leader and
global.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very well known. So it's strategically, I think it's quite a good decision. It remains to be seen how many seats they're going to get, but they're obviously going to take votes off the Conservatives.
Is he going to win in Clacton, do you think?
Well, that's another one. I think people are going to have to be voting tactically for him to not win because it's a huge Brexit area. They voted.
So he is the favourite,
and I think he's overwhelmingly the favourite. Yes, and he seems to be getting a pretty good reception wherever he goes, apart from when he gets things thrown at him. Which then makes headlines and gives them even more airtime. So Reform UK, I think that the main worry there for the Conservatives obviously is that they're going to take a lot of votes from the Conservatives. It's not that Reform UK are going to be a big party in government. They may win a few seats, but it's more how many votes can they take off the Conservatives.
Gosh, it's all fascinating. We've got a couple more weeks, and we're obviously going to be following this very, very closely. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
On Wednesday, Cyril Ramaphosa was sworn in for another term as South Africa's president, 3 weeks after elections stripped his party of its parliamentary majority and forced it into a power-sharing alliance with longtime rivals. Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Democratic Republic of Congo leader Felix Tshisekedi, and Zimbabwe's Emmerson Mnangagwa were among the dignitaries at the ceremony, which was followed by a 21-gun salute and an Air Force flyover. The African National Congress, which has ruled the country outright since apartheid ended 3 decades ago, garnered just over 40% of the vote in May, with millions of its supporters either backing a splinter party led by its former leader Jacob Zuma or staying away from the polls amid widespread disgruntlement over high levels of poverty, unemployment and crime. The main opposition, Democratic Alliance, and 4 other parties have agreed to the ANC's proposal to join a so-called government of national unity and back the 71-year-old Ramaphosa's reappointment. In exchange, there will be allocated posts in the cabinet and parliament, though details are still being negotiated. Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by Africa analyst Tamzane Kajo. Tamzane Kajo, it's always a pleasure having you in the studio. I think it's best, of course, we pick up where we left the discussion a couple of weeks ago, because, of course, this week, Cyril Ramaphosa has been sworn in as the president of South Africa. He is going to be overseeing a second term. In his inauguration speech, he said that he's going to head a government of national unity. What does that unification look like?
Well, it's good and bad. So first of all, thank you for having me. President Cyril Ramaphosa being sworn in for a second term doesn't mean he's likely to finish the second term, because he is having to manage so many things. So the ANC, the African National Congress, wants that buzzword of saying that they are trying to have a government of national unity. Why? Just like I said, I know there are many other people who were disagreeing with the reality on the ground. The DA is a political party that represents the interests of mostly white people in South Africa. Are
you sure about that, Tamzane? Because I did say to you,
130%.
After our last discussion, a lot of people were offended at that 130%.
If you are white and business-related in South Africa, most of your interests are represented by the policies and the people within the DA. You just have to look at the complexion of the members of parliament that the DA is sending to parliament. Look at how many white people there are in the DA who are members of parliament compared to the representation of the population of South Africa. And then you will get your answer from that. And also look at what the DA has been saying since they were formed, what they represent and what they say they will do if they are to be in government.
You've mentioned some of the issues Ramaphosa will be contending with over the next couple of days, including, of course, the shape of his cabinet. But let's talk about the other challenges. We know creating jobs, tackling crime, major issues. What other issues will the government have to contend with?
I think the economy is the big one, because if the economy performs very well, then you are likely to have that trickling down and people are going to get jobs. But South Africa has got a lot of challenges. Even in the Western Cape, when people talk about, the DA has done well at local government level, you go to Khayelitsha, you go to all these other places where affluent white people don't live, there isn't much progress. So South Africa has got a big problem with crime. You've got a
Femicide,
big problem. Yeah, so you've got all these issues that need to be solved. If they are able to solve that, that will work. That will be very good. But you also have a lot of people who are foreigners and professionals, and there's been an attitude by some that they are not going to welcome, foreigners in the workplace. If they do that, then it might be difficult. But the DA, I think, and others have already said they want, especially Zimbabweans, to stay. Why? Because they know the value that these people actually bring to business. It's difficult to boost the economy and revive business if you want to get rid of all these professionals who are foreigners, like chartered accountants and doctors and engineers and everybody else. It is difficult to then have the manpower to employ to boost that economy.
Absolutely. Finally, Ramaphosa, during his inauguration on Wednesday, I believe it was, he said that he's promising a new era for South Africa. Of course, you're going to say that on Inauguration Day. Although people are gleaning onto that because we all want that. What does a new era of South Africa?
A new era means it's going to be difficult also for him. It's new for everybody. He also doesn't know whether there are people within the ANC rank who will say, well, we don't agree with you being in political bed with the DA, who will probably go and join Jacob Zuma and others in a secret vote. You don't know what's going to happen. But also it's going to change the DA, I think, for the better. You're already seeing now they are beginning to suspend some of their own MPs who they've got a record. Yeah, we've got a record of holding
supremacy,
racist and extreme views. So it could. This is why I'm saying it might work for South Africa, because now the DA will need to shape itself,
self-reflect,
to represent the entire South African population, rather than just a minority section that has been voting for them. The ANC will now need to do that, but it's going to continue. Back to our point. There's the ANC that aligns with Jacob Zuma. There's the ANC that aligns with President Ramaphosa. So we will see how they will manage all that. It could work, which will be good for Africa, or it could fall apart, which will bring us back to the issues of security and almost everything. So because there are a lot of people on Zuma's side who say, what was the point of fighting apartheid if you are just going to drag the DA back into government? But there are others who say, well, we are a new South Africa, we are a rainbow nation. Let's just forget about what has happened in the past. Let's all work together in the interest of the nation. So the jury's out. It's delicate. The cabinet will be the first thing that they will do. But then beyond that, when it comes to policy, when it comes to actually implementation of everything, it's going to be a challenging journey.
Absolutely, it's going to be a challenging, but as you said, South Africa is a rainbow nation. We love everybody, all colours. We don't want to be dominated by one race. We want to have our own freedoms, don't we? Really fascinating. Again, of course, we're going to have to bring you back to talk about the cabinet as soon as he makes some appointments. Tamzan Kujo, Africa analyst, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global, Abdoulaye Sila, Portfolio Manager and Head of Corporate Development at EnergyNet, will be joining me from here in the British capital to discuss next week's Africa Energy Forum, which is taking place in the Spanish city of Barcelona. And Emeka Ugu-Oju, founder of the Nesh Foundation, joins me from Lagos State with his assessment of the recently held Afreximbank AGM, which took place in the Bahamas. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Next week, Barcelona will host the Africa Energy Forum, a significant event bringing together key stakeholders from the energy sector across Africa and beyond. Key topics under discussion include renewable energy, investment opportunities, and innovative technologies that can help bridge the energy gap in Africa. Abdoulaye Sylla, Portfolio Manager and Head of Corporate Development at EnergyNet, the convener of the event, joins me now from London for more on this. Abdoulaye Sylla, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global today. Please, can you give us a brief overview of what we should expect next week at Africa's Energy Forum and what role specifically you'll be playing throughout the event?
Thank you so much for having me today. The African Energy Forum, as everyone knows, is the gathering when it comes to the energy sector. And next week, we're having our 26th edition in Barcelona, where we are expecting all the key players, the key leaders of the energy sector to join us. So the expectations, as usual, for AEF is you can expect a lot of deals to get signed. That's the platform we provide, networking opportunity, ideas and discussion. People can come, innovative ideas, so that the industry can move forward on the continent. So we target all four areas of the continent: north, south, east to west. We bring everyone from the project value chain. So you can expect a lot of discussion, in-depth discussion. One of the examples I can give you is like we're gonna have a session, for instance, where we've introduced this year, which is new. It's kind of a debate where we look at the role of gas, for instance, in Africa. And the title is Striking a Balance for Africa Gas Project, which is a key theme for everyone. Basically, it's a healthy debate where we look at the ongoing discussion in the sector as to whether natural gas is a good bridge for countries seeking to transition away from coal and oil. Is it a transitional? Is it an enabler? So a lot of people are discussing. Those are the sort of discussion you can expect at AEF next week.
Yeah, the whole discussion about whether or not compressed natural gas should be the transition fossil fuel is a very important discussion, a conversation currently happening in Nigeria. What other current trends and challenges are likely to be discussed next week, Abdoulaye? Because, of course, we know energy has been at the centre of geopolitics, mostly because of the invasion of Ukraine a couple of years ago. But then, of course, we've got COP29 coming up. A lot of pressure been placed on the shoulders of African leaders and businessmen to hurry up the transition. But, of course, they're making a lot of money in the energy sector.
Absolutely. There is so many current trends and challenges Africa are facing. As you know, we're always on the far end of things as an African man myself, which is why some of the reason I got into this role, but we'll get onto that later on. However, we do a lot at EnergyNet, we do a lot of extensive market research first. Before we put all this together, we do a lot of extensive market research. We talk to clients, key players in the market, your developers of this world, technology providers, the big EPC, even the large energy consumers. So we try to collect as much data from them. And if we look at trends, we can look at solar. Like solar energy is gaining momentum. You mentioned gas earlier, but we shouldn't forget that solar is gaining momentum with numerous large-scale and off-grid solar projects being initiated. Countries like Kenya, South Africa, Morocco are leading the solar capacity. We can look at wind as well. Wind projects are expanding, especially in countries with favorable wind conditions, such as Ethiopia and South Africa again. Hydro, also large hydropower project continues to be developed, particularly in the Republican Democratic area as well. So energy access expansion, it's on every government's agenda at the moment. If you look at Senegal, for instance, everyone is pushing for like the energy access expansion. And then you have also the regulators that are coming in terms of trend. So I can tell you for a fact, we have so many ministers that are coming and regulators, and all those African governments are reforming their energy policy and regulatory frameworks to attract investment and foster a more sustainable energy sector. So those are some of the trends that we're finding that are attracting investors, onto the continent. And however, on the flip side, you do have challenges as well. And the first one that comes to mind is the infrastructure deficiencies, like aging and insufficient infrastructure hampers the efficient generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity.
Now to our final topic. The African Export-Import Bank, also known as Afreximbank, has recently concluded its annual general meeting, or AGM, in the Bahamas. This significant event brought together key stakeholders from across Africa and the Caribbean to discuss and strategize on boosting trade and investment across both regions. Emeka Ugu-Oju, founder of the Nesh Foundation, was a delegate at the event, and he joins me now from Lagos State for more. Mr. Emeka Ugu-Oju, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. You were in the Bahamas last week at the recently concluded Afrexim AGM. Can you please provide an overview of the key highlights and outcomes from your perspective?
Yeah, I think I've been to a couple of Afreximbank annual general meetings. Okay, but this is the first one that you're having the annual general meeting with the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. So it's a first. So for some of us who are used to the AGM, it was a new thing, being joined with so many other people who wouldn't have attended the AGM. And if we put it in perspective, this is the third Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum. So it's more like how far have we come in the past 3 years or so. And I believe that from what has transpired, it has come to stay, and it will go from strength to strength. And the theme of Global Africa really nailed it, because initially it was more about the Africas and the Caribbean, but we're now seeing the big picture that it is going to stretch to, or I would say, people of African descent from all over the world, especially in the United States and in the South America. So I think this particular summit reinforced that we are really talking about a global Africa and not just Africa and the Caribbean. And if for that alone, that is worth it. Because if you're coming to the business side of things, which is basically what has made it different. Because as Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, said, Professor Rama has done what nobody has done before. We've had the political movement started by Marcus Garvey, yeah, but that was political. But now you have a movement that is based on economics, and it looks like that has been the missing link. And a few things were achieved. You were there, you would have listened to Dangote when he was talking, like he had vessels that come back empty to Brazil from Nigeria. But this time around, it's likely that things will now be shipped in those vessels to the Caribbean. And of course, on a personal basis, I was also part of something that has to do with hydrogen gas, which we're trying to look at alternative energy, that technologies will also be improved upon, both in Africa and in the Caribbean.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.